Not every conversation needs to be loud. Not every disagreement needs to become hostile. And not every man is interested in spectacle. The Society of Ordinary Gentlemen exists for those who believe that courtesy still matters, that restraint is a strength, and that how one conducts himself, especially when it is inconvenient, is a measure of character. This is not a platform for self-promotion. It is a place for thoughtful discussion, mutual respect, and personal accountability. The Society of Ordinary Gentlemen is an online community with the mission of cultivating modern gentlemen by teaching skills, habits, and mindsets that elevate personal style, communication, health, and lifestyle through community, courses, and mentorship. Membership is open to adults willing to uphold these standards.
Hello, and welcome to the Gentleman Forum. My name is Anthony Bunton, and I'm the director for the Society of Ordinary Gentlemen. And today's podcast is going to be a special one for me because I have the opportunity to have a good friend of mine that I've come to know from the Society of Ordinary Gentlemen, and he has become like a mentor for me, and it's such an honor to have him here. Mr. Randall Mastin, who is not only a member of the Society of Ordinary Gentlemen, but he is also director of protocol and etiquette for the society. And Randall, it's great to have you here today. Welcome to the Gentleman's Forum.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And it's great to be here. I'm really excited about sharing some ideas today.
That is great. Well, we're going to jump right into it right now. And Randall, if you can, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've been a music educator and professional musician my whole life. My parents were both professional musicians, and my father was my teacher when I was in high school. I went to a small private liberal arts college called Wartburg College in Waverly, Iowa, and graduated from there. And I got my master's degree at the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse, and I play in a professional symphony here in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and I was the artistic director of the La Crosse Youth Symphony for several years. And I teach elementary strings. I also have a cello studio at Reed Music Studios in La Crosse as well. And I have about 18 students there that I teach weekly. And some of them I've taught for several years, and many students over the years have become professional musicians and just lovers of music. And so that's the professional side of me. I have two children that are both grown. One is going to be 34 here in a month, and my son is 29, and she lives in Chicago, and he lives in Minneapolis. And my father just celebrated his 90th birthday in April, and it was a great celebration of he's a very spry, intelligent, funny man. He got up and sang songs and told old people jokes about himself and had a really great time. He's a wonderful mentor as to how getting older doesn't mean falling apart. It just he always says, if I'm going to get through getting older, I have to be smarter about it so I can still do the things I want to do. And it's a great way to live, great way to think. So I've had a lot of really awesome examples in my life of different people just kind of showing me a great way to live and how to be. So that's in a nutshell me.
Well, I tell you what, I am totally impressed with just hearing your achievements and everything. And I took band in elementary and high school, and now I wish I had taken it seriously. It's one of those things that you took it, and it's either because your friends were taking it or you saw a girl that you liked. But now, after listening to you, I was like, man, I wish I had taken that seriously. But it is great to have you here on the Gentleman's Forum, and also it's great that because you are the director of protocol and etiquette for the Society of Ordinary Gentlemen. And so I'm going to be picking your brain today on some things, and I hope you don't mind, but I think it's something that we all can learn from.
I hope so.
All right. Well, let me ask you this. How would you describe the definition of a gentleman, and how do you feel compared with modern day gentlemen?
Well, what is a gentleman? I think that's a really difficult question to answer in kind of a nutshell. To me, being a gentleman is kind of an all-encompassing. It's about not just the way you look; it's also about how you present yourself, how you conduct yourself. A lot of people, I think, get really hung up on the whole I'm going to be a gentleman and I'm going to wear a tie and I'm a jacket. And all those things are important, and you don't have to wear a tie and jacket necessarily to be a gentleman. But that term, I think in our times now, people are struggling so much because they want something better than what's to their presentation. I mean, I think to be a gentleman in modern society means, you have to be adaptable. I think to me, a true gentleman is somebody who's got an intellectual curiosity. You want to learn about things. You don't want to be one-sided. There isn't one way to look at life. If there's anything you can learn from all of our forefathers, is they were very curious about things. They were very open-minded to learning different things, learning about the world around them, but to keep themselves occupied and interested in whatever it is that they're interested in, but always learning, no matter your age or no matter what occupation is, and trying to expand yourself and becoming more than what you are. I think being a gentleman also means having kind of some kind of an end goal, like what do I want to become? Or how do I want people to see me? And then try to become that person that you want people to see you as. It's sometimes, you go through different stages of that changes as you go through life. You sometimes, when you're younger, you think one way. When you get older, you think a different way. But I think in the end, I think everybody wants to be respected and respectable. And I think that really is also the crux of what a gentleman is. And all of the things that go along with how can you be respectable and respected? And I think, of course, that starts with respecting yourself
Sure.
and having a, good hard look in the mirror sometimes and saying, okay, what am I? What do I want to be? Is what I am right now what I want to be? It doesn't have to do with material things so much. It's just your spirit. What is your core? What is it that you believe in? What kind of a person? What kind of a when you die, what do you want people to think of you as? What's your legacy? And when you think about life in that way, or the way I think of it too, is every single day I pass by people and I have a choice to be pleasant. I have a choice to be polite.
Right.
I have a choice to, if somebody looks angry or like somebody I don't want to talk to, maybe I don't know what's going on in their life. Maybe I need to try to be a little gentler, try to be a little more accepting of whatever it is and still be nice, still be polite. You don't always have to be nice, but I mean, you don't know what effect you can have on people just by saying something kind or being polite and not prejudging as best we can. We all do that, but and being a gentleman, I think, also means being generous, spirit, and generous with your time and with whatever means that you're able to be. Helping people out when you don't need to. Somebody struggling with something, help them. Whatever that is, be there for people, share your time. I don't want to drone on and on, but those are things that I think are core principles of not just being a gentleman, but just being a good person. I don't think the old-fashioned things people think of as being a gentleman are necessarily that applicable in modern times. There's certain things I won't mention what it is. I think everybody's got their own ideas of that, but I think for a modern day gentleman, I think just trying to be better than okay. So a better way for me to explain this is what I think men see as examples now. And I
Right.
think nowadays people see people being loud, people being super opinionated, the more brash and the more tough and cruel that you can be, that makes you just so much better of a man. That makes you that's a kind of, man, or those are the kind of role models that we see out there in everyday life in our political world. I mean, the more disgusting that you can be, the better, sound bites and try to do something to grab attention rather than being noble and trying to be something that later on somebody will be like, that was a good person. I didn't agree with them, but that, that's somebody I can respect.
Right.
I have never understood why anybody would want to be the kind of person that would be that's a popular type of person now. And when I was young, that would have been a social suicide to act like that. Nobody acted like that. And if they people did, but if they did, they were completely on the outskirts of society. not okay. And I think there's a definite need for more civility, and I think people are really trying to find where that is. And I think that's one of the reasons why our society has been so successful is because people are looking for something better than that.
You know, Randall, I'm glad you mentioned that because I think that this is something that is so needed and needs to be expounded on. And you've touched on quite a few things that you know. I know I was talking to Floyd Bailey, another member of the society, last week, and we had have the same discussion, and we were talking about when we were growing up. Our idea of a man was that you had to be almost animalistic. You know, you had
Right.
to be you had to be tough, perfume was sweat. It must, and your hands had to have callus you know, and any type of, you know, putting on lotion or pampering anything was considered weak. And it was just the opposite, because like you were saying, a gentleman who takes care of himself and respects himself is going to take care of himself. He's going to present himself. And it's much more than wearing suits. Yeah, I know you have a suit on, I have a suit on, but that's not what makes us gentlemen. It's the way we conduct ourselves, the way we carry ourselves, and not just when other people are around. It's what we do in our private lives as well. You know,
Right. Exactly.
and so what you were saying, it resonates so much with the way things are going on today. How people talk, the entitlement that that we see going on nowadays that you know uh, and I was talking to somebody not too long ago, and we were discussing how even in our incarceration system that 90% of the people are in jail because of words, because I'm not gonna let nobody talk to me, I'm not gonna let nobody disrespect me. But the reality is it, like you said, we've gotten so uncivilized in the way we conduct ourselves, and there is no civility to the way people are conducting themselves nowadays. And I love how you said that because as one thing when I met you that got my attention was it wasn't just the way you dressed, but it's the way that you spoke, the way you carried yourself. And I was like, you know, this is somebody that I want to get to know. This is somebody that I can learn from. I like how I like how you carry yourself. I like it, how you represent yourself. And this, like you said, this is what the society is about. The society of ordinary gentlemen is about is teaching men how to conduct themselves in a proper way. And you're right, it does affect our political arenas, our communities. It has such a broad spectrum as far as being gentlemen. And I thank you for bringing that up because this is something that needed to be addressed. Let me ask you, when it comes to having confidence, how do you feel that relates to being a gentleman? Because I know, and people got this misconception of arrogance and confidence, and they think that if like you, I look at you as having confidence, not arrogance, but confidence, because I see the sureness in yourself. I see the confidence that you have, and it's nothing. It's not a tough thing that you got to be tough or anything. But how do you feel confidence relates to being a gentleman?
Well, I feel like that's always a struggle with everybody.
Sure.
I mean, everybody can pretend that they're always confident, and we all know that isn't true. And if there's anybody out there that thinks, Anthony or super confident guys and never freak out about anything, and we never worry or we never get scared, wrong. That's absolutely wrong. I think just admitting, for one thing, that we're not always confident and that we're not always successful at everything, mistakes, and we're imperfect people. That being able to acknowledge that, but then get up and try again. And I think I think too, a lot of it is, what are you doing with your life and your career? What are you doing something that's meaningful that you feel that you can respect yourself for doing, even if it's something that's, you know, what doesn't have to be anything glamorous, even if you're doing working at a checkout clerk somewhere, great. But then you might have other things in your life that you're doing that make your life family or whatever, and feeling good about those things that you're doing. You need to find something, inside yourself, a way to give back to others and a way to be, again, a decent person. I hate to keep pounding that fact home, but that is what will make you a confident person, because you start to feel like, okay, I'm doing good. The reason I'm on this earth is to do good. I'm doing, I'm helping this person. I'm trying to be father, a good husband, a good whatever it is, a person, neighbor, teacher. A lot of my teaching I spend really trying to help kids build up confidence. That's something that one thing that I find is universal with all students, and I think this is applicable to everyone in general, is that we spend so much time thinking about what we can't do, and we don't think about what we can do. So when I have a student that comes in and they play something, and I think, well, that was pretty decent, and then they shake their head, they're like, man, that was so bad. They feel so bad about it. I make them tell me 3 things that they did well, and you would be shocked at how difficult that is for some kids to do that, because they're so trained to focus on what they can't do. Is if you can change your mind around and focus on, "Okay, I did this well. I didn't do that well, but I'm gonna try to fix that. But I did this well, I did that well," and try to focus also on if you're not feeling confident and you're not feeling good about yourself, then try to figure out what it is that would make you feel that way and try to then.
Right.
So I guess, to your question, how is that applicable to being a gentleman? I think part of it is just feeling good about yourself, period. And if you don't, then you need to work on yourself and take some examples from some other people and try to figure out what it is that you can do to make your life something that you can feel proud of, regardless of what that is. It doesn't have to be splashy or big. If you can affect one person's life for the better, your life is worthwhile. Then you can feel confident and respect yourself.
Having said that, let me ask you a question. Do you think that being honest with yourself plays a big portion in that confidence and being honest with yourself and all the limitations that you have?
I would honestly say I could speak for 2 hours on that subject. I feel like an authority on on that subject, because I am the living embodiment of what happens to people when they're not honest with themselves. Yes, I mean, you need to live your life authentically. You need to decide who you are. You need to face who and what you are, and then be who you are. Be yourself.
You know,
And if people don't like that, tough. That's you've got to be yourself. I'm not going to expound on that, but that is, yes, absolutely something. And I think a lot of people when they struggle with a lot of things, if you would just sit down and think what it is, it's like, just okay, I eat too much, or I drink too much, or a lot of these kind of things, but you think, I really don't drink that much. I don't really eat that much, but you're a big guy, or you drink too much, or different things like that. And those are really ridiculous examples, but I mean, a way to just look in the mirror and be like, what am I? And then be your authentic self. That is probably the most important thing you could be. That's the baseline of turning your life around, is looking in the mirror. And if you don't like it, then be yourself, but be a better version of yourself
right.
if you need to.
Sure. And I say that because for me, when I was growing up, I had a bad speech impediment. When I was really young, I stuttered really bad, and I did want to talk in class. I did want to read in class, much less get up and give a presentation. And having that denial of not wanting to admit that, okay, I do have this, I do have this deficiency, if you will, or I do have this, this limitation, and not owning up to it and say, okay, you know what, I do have that, but I still can, you know, do what I want to do. I still can.
Right.
I would have never thought growing up that I'd be doing a podcast. When I was in the military, I was teaching combat life saving courses to 300 or 400 soldiers at a time. When I was a kid, I would never thought that. Growing up, then when I became a minister, I never thought I'd be standing up in a church, talking to several hundred people in the congregation at one time. But when I came to realization that yes, I do have this limitation, but it's not going to stop me. It helped me to gain that confidence in myself, and in gaining that confidence in myself, I learned to respect myself, to love myself, which allowed me to further help other people, and love on other people. And I think that's such a great thing that you pointed out about, you know, the confidence and respecting yourself and owning up to yourself and stuff. I think that's great. And I'm so glad that you brought that out because I was in denial for a long time, and it wasn't until I came to that realization that, look, yes, you do have a speech impediment, but that is not gonna define you. That's not gonna stop you, you know? And when I came to that realization, I was able to overcome, well, I shouldn't say overcome, because I still have that a little bit, but I was able to deal with it and use it to move on with my life. So, yes, thank you for pointing that out.
Right.
How do you feel, about believing in yourself when it comes to, on this journey, we talked before, we are all on a journey of being gentlemen. It doesn't stop, and with the day it stops, the day you stop living, because we're always evolving. But I think that, having the confidence in yourself and believing in yourself, do you think that that also is an imperative on this journey that of being a gentleman?
Well, the journey that we're on hopefully is one of self-improvement and trying to better ourselves all the time. And every step we take forward, we hopefully are trying to become better people and different things. I mean, as far as like I'll give you an example that doesn't have anything to do with being a better person, but it has to do with our dress. So when I first started changing around my wardrobe and we had talked about this a different time, but I did that simply because I lost a lot of weight and I had to get new clothes, and I decided that I was just going to go with this kind of look because it's something that I had always loved and I wanted to get back to it. When I first started being honest with myself, I tended to get a little overboard, over accessorizing. I got a little, would wear these humongous pocket squares and all kinds of things that were really over the top. And I have
Yep.
to give a shout out to Jason Rochester, who I always call my sartorial hero, because he doesn't post his outfits as often as he used to. But when he used to post fairly often, I would look at his stuff and think, man, he had really quality clothes and a really great look of, I don't want to say restraint I want to say that in the most positive way. He had always had a nice pocket square, nice ties, really beautiful clothes. They were a little bit more conservative than what I was doing, which was a much needed thing. And I would study what he wore, and I thought, I really need to kind of rethink some of the stuff I'm doing. And as time's gone by, I using his example and some other people's examples here and just different investigatings I've done, I've learned how to kind of tamp that part of my personality down a bit. So I could I mean, I still have a tendency to be a bit theatrical, but it's great to learn from other people that are here and being able, that part of, at least part of that part of the journey, just good to have other examples and other people to see. I wish people would post their outfits a little bit more often because we can all learn from everybody else. You're putting yourself out there. There's no doubt about it. There's times that I post stuff and I think, God knows what people are going to say about this. Maybe this is great, maybe it looks really bad, and then you don't get any comments, and you think, oh man, what did I do that for? But you're putting yourself out there, and nobody is going to judge, and everybody's pretty accepting of that, and it's really a nice way to kind of upscale your look a little bit by giving some examples of some other people that
Yeah,
isn't
I love when you post stuff because I see your combinations and stuff, and I'm like, "I did not even think about that," or I've got to get that color tie, or I gotta get that type of handkerchief. I mean, you're right. I love and I wish more men would post stuff. I think it'd be an encouragement for them when, when they do post things, because I think that it like you said, nobody's gonna judge you, nobody's gonna belittle you, but I think it gives you that belief and that confidence in yourself,
right.
and encouragement to want to do. And I think, Randall, you said something earlier about, the how society is right now with, saying whatever on their mind and putting people down and stuff. So that's one thing I like about the society. It's kind of like a solace place for gentlemen where you can come in and you can get encouragement and you can hear positive things. You don't hear all that negative stuff that you hear that goes on, or out there in society, or out there in other communities and stuff. When you come here, you get a chance to be around a bunch of gentlemen that have the same mindset as you, and to see these men dress the way they are, and to hear these in-depth conversations that go on, I think it's great.
I agree with you. I wholeheartedly agree. The thing I appreciate the most about this society, for the most part, I mean, if it were my choice, I would have a rule about we can't talk about politics and we can't talk about too much religion. And that between those two things, especially the politics side, it's so nice to go somewhere where you don't have to hear or see that. It's just saturated everywhere. Every time I used to love to get up and drink coffee and look at the news, and I just hate that now.
Sure.
I mean, it's just, some with negativity and stuff. Now what I do is I get up and have my coffee and I scroll through our society page, and that's a lot more fun. A lot more upscale, makes me feel good, and I get to see all this stuff. So again, I'm going to encourage everybody to get out there and post more of your outfits, or just post more ideas. It's really it's a great thing. We can't always have one or two people doing that all the time. I feel awkward posting sometimes because I think, gosh, I post my stuff all the time and I'm not doing it. I assure you, I'm not a pretentious man. I'm not doing it. So, hey, look what I'm wearing. But it's just, it's kind of a hobby for me and I enjoy, and I think, oh, this is, pretty spent a ton of time trying to put this together. So it's nice to just put it out there for people to see, because otherwise, who cares? I teach in an elementary school, and those kids, I could wear a clown suit and they'd be fine with that. So,
No, knowing you, you still make it look dapper.
well, I don't know about that. There's only so much my skills can do.
Oh my goodness. So let me ask you a question. When it comes to self-respect uh, and I've talked to a couple of gentlemen about this. I tell people all the time that you shouldn't just live like a gentleman when other people are around. It should be a lifestyle. You should be doing it whether somebody's around or not. How do you feel that plays a role in being a gentleman? Do you think that the things that you do privately also reflect on what you do publicly? Like for me, whether I go out to eat or I'm sitting at home, I always set the table, with the fork, knife, spoon, napkin. Even if when I go out to and I try not to eat at a fast food place. I think I told you before. One day I was in a rush and I was getting a headache because I hadn't eaten all day, and I stopped at the KFC to get something to eat, and I while waiting for my food to come out, I went and got my napkin, my plastic, a knife, fork, and spoon. I said that set the table up and went and got my food, and some people noticed and came over and sat down, and we started talking, and it led to me signing the contract. But you know, I do that even at home. I do that. Do you think that that what you do privately reflects on what you do in the public?
It's kind of like building a house. If you don't have a good basement, the whole rest of the house isn't going to stand. That's the foundation. That you're not going to be a gentleman if you're doing things privately that aren't gentlemanly, or if you're not building the foundation of being a good person. What's the point? It's fake. It's false. I mean, you have to build yourself first. Obviously, that to me, that's like the ground floor. Then everything else comes up and build around that. That you can't be a gentleman. I mean, then you're not a gentleman. You're a fake, and you're just a poser. That's not even a real thing. And pretty soon you're going to see through that. I mean, there's a great quote that says, an evil man in a cashmere suit is still an evil man. And you can dress yourself up all you want to, but it's what's inside that's what people can see. They can feel that energy. They can see and feel your goodness just by your little things that you do.
Sure.
But that you don't do those little things because you want people to notice you. You're doing them because you want to be better. You want to be a better person. That's the whole point of this journey. That's the point of the journey of life. It's not just about being a gentleman, but
Right, exactly. And, I think and this is just, one aspect of it, but I go to a lot of conferences and meetings and stuff, and I can always tell the person who does not wear a suit on a regular basis, because they're constantly tugging at their clothes. They're constantly, because and why is that? Because they're not used to wearing it, and like you said, eventually whatever you do or don't do is gonna come to light, and I can always tell because it's that person whose suit is wrinkled or who shirt is dirty or has a stain on or not not sitting right, or their ties the clip on, and I'm not trying to belittle anybody, but I'm just saying is you can tell the person that wears a suit on a regular basis, or even when they're talking, you can tell by the conversation that this is not their element, this is not their normal environment, And so, yes, I personally think that what you do privately does, reflect on what you do in public. Like you said, it won't take long somebody to figure out that you're a fake. This is not who you really are. And as a gentleman, you want people to see you as that. And it's kind of like that muscle memory. The more you do it, the more it becomes natural. So
Agreed, yes.
so the more you set your table at home, the more it becomes natural. And I agree with you. I think that's great. You talked about being a good person, and I think that is such a great quality as a gentleman. Can you expound a little bit on the aspect of being a good person? And yes, it doesn't make you 100% gentleman, but I think it does play a good role, a, good- a, a good role as being a gentleman.
Well, I'll tell you a story that comes to mind with that. There's a woman that works as a teacher's aide at our school, and at Christmas time, well, first of all, she doesn't drive. She lost her mother a few years ago. She's not old, but she seems old, older than she is, and she was caretaker for her mother for years, and then her mother died, and she doesn't drive. She had a little tiny house, and and I was giving her rides to school because she doesn't live that far from me. And I one day it was pouring rain, and I said, "Well, how on earth did you get to school?" Because I knew she didn't drive, and she said, "Well, I walk, or I have to walk like a half mile to the bus stop, and it's like a mile to school." And I'm thinking, so you're walking halfway to school to get on the bus and drive for 30 minutes so you can get, I mean, that just didn't make any sense to me. And I thought, well, it's not really that out of my way to go pick her. So I did that. And then she called me one night and said, "I am not feeling well." And she said, I'm hoping you can take me over to the doctor. And anyway, she ended up having to have some surgery. She was in the hospital for like 3 weeks, and she has this cat, and she was so worried about her kitty. So I went in and took care of the cat, and her house was just like, I mean, she's been not feeling well and not being able to do much in her house. Was a bunch of us got together. We went over there, and I asked her permission, of course. So we cleaned her house, and we got her some fresh food. We cleaned out her refrigerator, give her some rides to school. It was at times incredibly inconvenient to do that. And I'm not going to lie, there were times that I was like, oh man, I'm already running late, but now those are the kinds of things that you don't have to do that, but those are things that you can do for somebody. I have been in situations. Not grew up, but when I was a younger man, I raised both of my children myself. My son was 2 and my daughter was in second grade, and I spent all of my time being a father. And there were times that I really struggled. I struggled to have enough money. I struggled to be able to figure out how am I going to get these kids to daycare? How I'm going to pay for this? How is this all going to happen? I always had somebody that would fill in the gaps and help me out, and I never forgot that. And every time I am around people that I hear and feel hopeless, like I don't know what I'm going to do, I'm like, I can help you, because I just feel like such a strong connection to people that struggle with that I always want to be generous if I can be, because that was something that was afforded to me. But that's not why. I don't do it because that was something afforded to me. It just is something that I don't know why I'm drawn to doing that. It doesn't make me saintly, and I don't think I'm wonderful or anything like that. It's just something that nobody really knows that we did all that stuff, and I'm glad about that. That isn't the point. The point is, that poor woman got to recover in the hospital and not worry about her cat, not worry about, what's going to happen when I come home. She could just concentrate on recovering. And I always think, then someday if I'm in that situation, I'm hoping that somebody would do the same for me. And when you do things like that for people, that does come back to you. That's not the reason to do it, but it does.
And I know for me, it just makes me feel good when I can help somebody out, you know?
Right.
And even on my baddest day, the mere thing of opening the door for somebody, or seeing somebody carry a bag and say, "Hey, can I help you with that? Let me get that for you." It just makes it feel that much better.
Right.
and it's the same way, like, people ask me, like, "Why do you all wear suits?" And stuff. I was like, "Because, I like to look nice, but also on my worst day, on my the bad day, I can look and I can look at myself and say, 'Man, I feel good about myself. I look good,'" you know? People understand the how the mindset of just doing good and looking good plays in a person's life, even on your worst day, these little things that we take for granted make you feel better about your day, you know.
I agree.
And, and the more you do it, the more you wanna continue to do it, you know? Like you said, it becomes almost infectious because you when you do something for somebody and not expecting anything in return, it just makes it feel so much better, and it makes you want to 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 help the next person, Just like a suit, when you put that suit on, and it's like, "Man, I feel so good," and it's like the next day, it's like, "What else can I wear?" Because it just makes you feel good. Doing good things and looking the best, and like you were saying earlier, being the best version of yourself, it plays such a integral part of your life and getting through life. And we know that even nowadays, things are just chaotic, but to have that feel good feeling about you helps you deal with the things that are going on in life.
I agree with that.
What are your thoughts on being respected in the community and in the workplace? I know, like for you, you teach music, and I can tell that you're well respected. You know, I think and I think that so many men have this misconception of they want to be respected, but they like you said it earlier. They think they got this misconception that being the loudest person, being the most obnoxious person is going to get them noticed, and
Right.
I think that's a misconception. How do you feel about being respected in the community?
Well, I'm not entirely sure what you mean by that. I mean, being respected in the community is what have you done for the community?
Right.
What have you done to earn that kind of respect? Getting back to your previous point about, being people wanting to younger men finding, and I think some of that is just the culture that we have, and the role
Right.
models that people have. The person that, that walks into a room and beats everybody up, and is super badass. Those are the people that are like, oh, well, those kind of people are never really respected. You're just feared. That's a different thing.
Right.
That's not, and being feared isn't. It never gets you anywhere. It just, there's always going to be somebody tougher than you. And the same thing with trying to feel accomplished about things. You can feel accomplished, but there's always going to be somebody better than you. You
Exactly.
have to be the best that you can be, and and do the contributions as best you can. And I think that's something that I really have noticed as time has gone by, where that has been something that people just don't care about at all. It used to be that, I think we had this conversation once before. My grandparents were very blue collar people. My grandfather was a salesman. I think he only got through, like, I don't even think he went to high school. I think he got through, like, grew up in the Dust Bowl. They were dirt poor. I mean, it was just unbelievable how poor they were. And he moved up to Wisconsin because his brother had gotten, he was older, and before their family fell into poverty through the, all that, was a minister, and was a minister up in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, which is where I grew up. And he hopped a freight train and went up there to be with his brother. But what he always yearned for was to be respectable,
Mhm.
and people back in those days, my dad always says, when I went to school, high school, I always wanted to wear the best clothes I could, because, anybody could be poor. And there were a lot of people that were, he said, but you don't want to be dressing poorly, because that was very much looked down on, because people wanted to be respectable.
Right.
I mean, men wore, hats and jackets and suits, not because they're trying to be gentlemen, but because they wanted to be respectable. They didn't have to have a lot of money. But now I don't think anybody gives one hoot about being respectable. No one cares about that.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can show up to work wearing stinky pajama pants and Crocs and don't care one snip, you can swear at people. I just can't even get over, like going to Walgreens, and and some moms cussing at their kids to hurry up and get over here, and they're being all naughty. And I think, God, poor teacher.
Right.
the slightest idea how to behave and act. And I'm going to give a real quick shout out to teachers right now, because teachers, people love to bash teachers and say, education nowadays, they don't teach this and they don't teach that. That is, I think education now is just as good or better than it ever was. But I think the problem is that we have parents that don't teach their kids how to be decent kids. So you call in a parent and say, Johnny just an F bomb at me and tried to shove me out of the way when I told him he had to come in for recess. And the kid's like, and the parents will defend Johnny.
Right.
Like, what, I did something like that at school, which I never did. But if I would have, my dad would have beat my ass from here to the next county. There would have been never a second time doing that again. And would have believed the teacher, and I would not have been part of that conversation. And you used to have the kid sitting there with his arms crossed, looking at you like, "Hey, what are you going to do to me now?" I mean, it's really difficult to be a teacher in this kind of environment. You just look on TV and see all the school board meetings where all the people are cussing and swearing at the school board and swearing at teachers, and you can't make my kid do this and do that. And yeah, it's a really tough profession. My son, I counseled him out of being a teacher, and he's the first person in a few generations that hasn't been, because I'm like, you don't want to get into that mess. And that's really sad to think that, but that's the degradation of our society and civility, where people, you don't, there's, I forgot even what your question was here in
No,
that
but
little tangent here, but
you are so correct about this, and this leads into another question I was going to ask you, but just stay here for a moment. So many parents. You're right. They want to put the training on teachers and not on themselves. You know,
right.
I saw this. It was a parody, but it was actually true though. And when I say it's true, I mean not that it actually happened, but it's true in respect to how people can be. It was a parody of a teacher calling a parent and saying, "Hey, I got your son here, and your son was being very disruptive in class." And the parent was like, "Wait, hold on, why are you telling me?" Well, you're the parent. He said, "No, no, no, no. You're responsible until 2:30. That's your problem. You handle it." And now if and is yeah, it sounds funny, but that's the
It doesn't
mindset.
sound funny to me. That's a real thing. That
Right.
happens
Well,
all of the
right. And
time.
that's my
That's a
point.
real thing.
Yeah, and I'm saying it sounds funny to some people, but this is a reality.
Right.
They expect the teachers to raise their children. You know, you know,
As long as they don't criticize them. Nobody wants to take accountability, and that is extremely frustrating,
and
very difficult.
and this is what's happening so much, and people are not raising their kids correctly, and they are leaving these kids out here to figure it out on their own. Which goes into another question that I was going to ask you. What does masculinity or being a man mean in today's world? Because, you know, I look at you and you are a a well-dressed, well-groomed man. And I hope that when people look at me, they see the same thing. But to the mindset of some people, like we were talking in the beginning of the podcast, is when I was growing up, being a man, you had to have dirty fingernails, or you had to have callus on your hands, and you know, uh, God forbid you put on any type of cologne, unless it was going to a funeral or something, But that's the mindset of what our young men are looking at as being masculine. What is your definition of masculinity?
I mean, I did not grow up the way you did. I mean, I grew up with parents and grandparents that dressed exactly like I'm dressing now
Mhm.
and took great pride in the way they looked. And that was what a real man should be, somebody who is cultivated and somebody who is, intellectually curious and all of those things. I think it's really difficult for a young man right now, probably more than any other time, because I feel like there is no definition of what masculinity means. And that's something that there's no real role that you can say, okay, this is what you have to be a man. Now, back when I was a kid, I remember some parent getting mad because somebody picked on their kid who was a bully and deserved to get picked on. And he got mad and pulled the bus driver off the bus at a shot and just beat the crap out of him. And then people would settle arguments that way. So that was one way to look at the old days. I mean, people were that way too. I think masculinity really just means being a confident in what you are. You can really well self-groomed man. There's never going to be a female that's going to think, oh, I don't really like that guy because he smells too good and he's way too well dressed and he's way too, he's got too good of manners. Oh, no, no, I'm going to pass on that. No, that's not going to happen. A tough guy might be exciting, to some girls for a while, but what is that?
Right.
Somebody with some kind of substance. I think I was reading somewhere that I'm interested in financial security than any other thing. We all know this because we all know the ugly guy that has a beautiful wife. And
Right.
as long as he's got money, what does it matter? But and also swag, that if you've got a little swag, that helps out too. But that's almost an impossible question to answer because I my own feeling is somebody who's my son. I'll say just a shout out to this guy is the epitome of what I think is a great. He's a nicest man. He doesn't dress like I do, but he dresses well, and he always smells good, looks good, clean. He couldn't help it. He had an older sister and he had me for a dad. So of course, he's going to be a clean, clean kid. And he's in different sports. He's really an empathetic person. He listens. When he was growing up, I remember there was about 4 years that we didn't have cable TV because I just couldn't. And we'd play board games every night. We ate dinner together all the time, and we learned how to talk and visit. And it's funny every once in a while if we're out somewhere and I'm checking my phone for something, he'll reach over and grab my phone. And he said, "Nope, him." And he's 29 years old. Not he's not my age, and he's really adamant about if you're going to talk to somebody, be present and talk to them. Fun. He was in the military just I think somebody like that, and he isn't all spit and polished. He doesn't wear a tie all the time. He dresses nice, but what he is a great human being, and
Sure.
and somebody who spends the time to really get to know people. He's an empathetic person. He can see things from more than one side. He's not one sided. I think all of those things make for a kind of a man that anybody would want to be around.
And so, and I want to make a clarification because I said earlier that me when I was talking to Floyd Bailey, we were talking about that when we grew up, that we thought that masculinity, being a gentleman, excuse me, being a man meant that you had to have dirty fingernails and stuff. I was raised to be a gentleman. My father was an officer in the Air Force. He was a minister. My mother was a nurse. I was raised to be a gentleman. And but in the area in the era that we grew up in, I was under the impression and that's why I never took it seriously. My parents, would raise me to be a
Right.
gentleman, but I was looking at, the big burly guy, the one with the rough hands and stuff. Little did I know that my parents were raising me as a gentleman and as, and the qualities I was talking about having me being well groomed and stuff like, my grandparents taught us, that, you know, you always put on something. Like my granddad said, I didn't care. And back then it was what Old Spice and Brute 33, uh,
Yeah, I
you
forgot
know,
about that.
but my grandfather raised told us that you always put on something. If you can't afford nothing but Old Spice, you put something on. And my grandma just tells all the time, if you can smell yourself, other people can smell you. So if you can smell your own body odor, then everybody else can smell it. If you can smell your own cologne, then everybody. But that's how I was raised, and I can tell that just describing you describing your son that he's a gentleman. No, he might not wear a suit all the time, but the suit does not make him a gentleman. And it's and this is what we're talking about. This is what we're talking about as far as the society and of ordinary gentlemen and how being a gentleman. Yes, there are a lot of guys in the society that don't wear suits all the time, but that doesn't make them any less of a gentleman. It's
Right.
it's it's who they
I mean,
are.
I don't think wearing a suit has really anything to do with being a gentleman at your core. It's
Right.
what you are that makes you a gentleman, not necessarily, you don't have to wear a suit and tie every day. Another thing about being a man and being masculine that I failed to address earlier that I want to point out. I just want to tell this story, hopefully briefly, but just to give you an example of this is My father, I'd never, ever, ever seen him cry. I'm really close with him. Did when I was growing up. He was a music professional too, but we also worked on. We painted cars in the summer. He had a little body shop. So we spent all of our time together, so much time. Never saw him cry. When my mother died 3 years ago, he just could not stop. He would cry, and then he would try so hard not to, because that was not in his mind masculine. And we talked about that. I said, there's no difference between crying and laughing. It's an emotion. If you can't be in touch with, I said, mom died, you were together for 63 years, and of course you've never been alone. It's awful. And it's just going to come up and hit you, cry all you want to, talk about it. And as time went by, he got more and more comfortable with letting that. I said, you're not going to ever heal from this if you try to be tough. I said, who are you being tough for? That's just dumb. Be just be what you are. And I think for men, that's another really tough thing, trying to get in touch with you, trying to be okay with all of your emotions, not just, your tough guy, not saying you have to run around and weep all the time. But
Sure.
my point is, don't be afraid to, we're fully human when we're fully emotional. When you're in touch with all of those emotions and you're okay with all of them, because it is okay, that it isn't any different. We all get depressed. Everyone cries. Everyone gets frustrated. Everyone gets angry. I mean, I hit my head the other day on a hanging plant and I punched it all the way across the lawn. And then I thought, wow, dude, what did you do that for? That was so immature. But it's most those are just things that we have to accept. To deny your emotionalism, I think you have to be able to accept all of that to become a whole person, to become a true
Sure.
gentleman or just a true good person. I feel like a good person and a gentleman are intertwined. You can't talk about one without being the other.
Exactly. And I like to tell people that, it's okay to be it's okay not to be okay. You know,
Right.
you
100%.
it's okay not to be okay. You're not gonna be 100% all the time. You're not gonna be the perfect person all the time. It's okay. You might have, like I said, growing up, I had a disability of stuttering. It's okay not to be okay, and it's okay to have emotions. What that means? That means you're human. That
Right.
means that you feel pain. You feel happiness, you feel laughter, you feel sadness. It's okay. It doesn't make you less of a man. It actually makes you more of a man when you are self-confident in yourself that, "Hey, I can cry," you know? I just happened to hear
Right.
the other day, Shaquille O'Neal said that he never saw his dad cry, and the day where when they buried his mom, his dad cried for about 30 seconds, and then he was like, "Okay, it's time to get back to work." And,
Yeah.
Shaquille was like, he was just looking at his dad like, "What?" You know? So, yeah, it's okay. It's okay to have emotions, and that's doesn't make you less of a man. So,
Yes, and
Randall,
I wanna quick let me real quick, piggyback on that too. I also think it's really, really important to tell men, young men, but men of all ages that, we all go through times where we're feeling bad, depressed,
mhm,
really down and sad, and it's really important to reach out and try to let somebody help you with that. Not necessarily going to see a shrink, but maybe if you to a friend, talk to somebody. That's a completely normal way to feel. We've all gone through horrendous life things where we're just like, I don't even know how I can go on. But the sun comes up the next day, and but reach out and try to, you know, talk to somebody. Don't try to bottle all that stuff up. That doesn't make you a weak person to do that. That makes you smart, because you're, trying to do something about it and trying to get help. And that's I think something that we don't talk about enough with.
exactly, exactly. And having said that, this would be a good segue into the closing. Randall, if you can, just spend the next couple of minutes just share your experience with the Society of Ordinary Gentlemen, and how you feel that they can help young men, and even men that are just starting this journey or are on this journey.
Well, I think that the society gives you a lot of different perspective. People from different ages. We have people that are young men, middle-aged men, older men, and it's good to be able to learn from different perspectives of people's lives. Partly of how to learn how to dress better. You don't need a lot of money to be a well-dressed man. Most of the things that I have, I've thrifted. but it's kind of like a hobby for me. I mean, I try to get the best quality things I can, and it's just fun. It's something I do for fun. But you can up your game with your look, but you can also up your game with your personality and becoming a better human being by just looking at the examples of the good people that are in this society. We're all on a journey. Not one single one of us have gotten there because there's no place to get. We're going somewhere. I mean, like you say, the last day of the journey is the last day of our life, and we're just all trying to feel our way through this web of life and trying to learn how to navigate it, be better people. And, it's always easier to go on a journey when you can go on it with somebody else rather than all by yourself. I've learned so much from people that have been in this group. I've learned people that I really want to be like, and occasionally people that I absolutely don't want to be like. You can learn a lot from that too. And I really feel like the people that we have now, especially that are in the group, are great people. And yeah, I just feel like this is a great society. And I'm so glad that I found it and I've stuck with it. It's changed a lot, especially in the last year or so, and a lot for the better. A change.
Well, Randall, I am so glad to have you here on the podcast today, and glad to have you in the Society of Ordinary Gentlemen, and extremely ecstatic to have you as the director of protocol and etiquette, because we got a lot of things that are coming up within the society. And I urge all of you that are watching and listening, find us. We are on the web. We're on World Wide Web, www.beamidgentleman.org. You can find us on Spotify. We're on Apple Podcasts. We're on YouTube. If you're interested, you can go on the internet. You can go type in school, SKOOL, and you can search for the Society of Ordinary Gentlemen, and you can find out more about us. And you can join. And if you do join, let them know that you heard Randall or myself on the podcast. And because it is a private community, it's free, but it's private because we only want men that are serious about this journey of being a gentleman. And you don't have to have any experience. You don't have to make a certain amount of money. This is about men coming together and fellowshipping and sharing their journey together and encouraging one another. And I promise you that you will not be disappointed. And I task you today to be a better version of yourself. Randall, it's a pleasure having you on. And please, can I ask you a favor?
Sure.
Will you come back again on some other podcasts? Because there's so much that I want to discuss with you, and so much that I want to get in depth with you. And I tell you, I just love talking to you. You're such a pleasure
Thank
to
you.
talk to.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I'd love to come back. Yeah, that'd be great. We
And
do have a lot to talk about. There's lots to do.
and I want to, before we leave, I got to ask you. I heard that you have a tie collection that is just phenomenal, and I'm a tie man, so I want to see this. So maybe one day you can share with us your collection of ties.
I would love that. That would be great. Sure. It's a little bit of an obsession. So yeah, I'd love to share my obsession with anybody. Yeah, it'd be fun.
Well, again, Randall, thank you so much, and thank you guys for joining us on the Gentleman's Forum. And I challenge you to be the best version of you, and we'll see you next time on the Gentleman's Forum. Take care. Goodbye.
Not every conversation needs to be loud. Not every disagreement needs to become hostile. And not every man is interested in spectacle. The Society of Ordinary Gentlemen exists for those who believe that courtesy still matters, that restraint is a strength, and that how one conducts himself, especially when it is inconvenient, is a measure of character. This is not a platform for self-promotion. It is a place for thoughtful discussion, mutual respect, and personal accountability. The Society of Ordinary Gentlemen is an online community with the mission of cultivating modern gentlemen by teaching skills, habits, and mindsets that elevate personal style, communication, health, and lifestyle through community, courses, and mentorship. Membership is open to adults willing to uphold these standards.